a fellow Canadian, Michelle Letendre, who I'm sure
yeah.
you know real well,
Yeah.
Pat's current coach, right? Pat
Yep.
Vellner's current, yeah. Um, I feel like I'm pretty good friends with her. I've spoken with her on the phone a lot. I've had her on my old podcast, which I don't do anymore, because I'd rather do stuff like this. And we talked about steroids in CrossFit, and she's been to the games a whole lot of times, and she was part of the real evolution of the games. I don't know
Yep.
exactly what years, but I remember, 2013 all the way up through, God, could have been 2017 or 2018, seeing her in the games consistently. She switched over to Olympic weightlifting a couple times, or like one of those times, and she always had good technique, always was a good mover. But she had told me, she's like, in my entire career of, I don't know how many regionals games or regionals, how many, private CrossFit events, they weren't sanctionals at the time. And even the games, I was only tested 6 times. And she was, third place, and she, all of these different things. And I feel like obviously the sport is evolving, things are changing, but in my opinion, and I'm sure you agree, that's probably an unacceptable way to run a professional sport, is to have someone who is that directly involved in the sport and so prevalent. Like Michelle Letendre, I mean, she was involved for a
Yeah.
long
She's up
time.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. And to have only been tested, I think it might have been less than 6 times. And every time she knew exactly when they were coming, like, because they just, I know there's out of competition testing now, but I want to know what your thoughts are around drug use and the potential for drug use in CrossFit.
Yeah. It's not something like we talked on the phone the other day, and it's not something I talk about a lot. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and I gave him an analogy that I think is pretty astute. And I'm like, if I was a politician, and at the end of every speech I said, by the way, I don't take bribes, and I'm not a corrupt politician. Thank you and good night. People would be like, wait a second. Like, why does he keep bringing that up? And so it's kind of like me. I don't say like I'm a drug-free athlete, because I am. Like, I've never taken a performance-enhancing drug. I've never smoked a cigarette. That's just not something I've ever done. But I don't like, go around touting it, because it's just, then it kind of looks like I have something to hide. So for me, like, I stay kind of like, I don't know what the right word is. I don't think ignorance is the right word. I intentionally like don't think that much about it, because it would just kind of upset me. Like, I think I said to you, like, I haven't watched the Icarus documentary, because I just don't really want to know
Yeah, I think
how. Yeah, it's like I just don't really want to know how much it could help, because I don't plan on taking it, and I don't want to be on the starting line thinking like I can't beat that guy because he's got like a fancy NOS exhaust in his car and I don't.
Yeah, I like that
Yeah,
approach, and I think that's what a lot of weightlifters have from clean countries, or generally clean countries, ones that
yeah,
don't have systemic doping. They if you get off the platform and you start thinking about other people's performances and how they're benefiting, you'll never be as good as you possibly can be. I imagine in your scenario, you're thinking when you finish an event and you lose to someone, you say, well, I could have been better here, here, and here. There's no question. That is
yeah,
objectively true. I fucked up here. I got a no rep here. I paced. I went out too hot, or I went out
yeah,
too slow. You're always thinking that, rather than thinking, well, I had no shot of beating this guy because he's a cheater. You know,
yeah. And that's
even if
and
he
when
is, even if he is Ricky Gerard.
I knew you'd have to slide one in there.
I
Um,
had to. I had to.
um, but yeah, so that's exactly it, right? When I first, after a year doing CrossFit, I was pretty good at it. Like, I was probably about the 100th best CrossFitter in the world, and I was a year in, and I was still like not very strong. And I thought, oh, if I just like keep chipping away at this, I'm going to get a little better and get stronger, and just kind of maintain my like aerobic capacity, my fitness, and my metabolic conditioning just kind of stayed the same, or at least since then. Just got stronger and kind of built around it. And yeah, so it's just not something I like put a lot of thought into. I mean, the reality is, yeah, I've competed against Ricky, but I'm sure I've competed against other athletes that have used a performance enhancing drug at some point. And the testing, as far as the testing goes, like, it could always be better. I know I think it obviously costs money. And the tough thing with our sport too is, so with like Olympic weightlifting, you have, once you've done, once you've done well, you're in like a testing pool, right? So you're in that
Yes.
testing pool, and you like can't get out of it. If you want to get out of it, then you can never compete again, type thing, right?
Yeah, you have to. There's a bunch of rules around that. You can't just say I'm retiring, take a bunch of drugs, and come back. You have to be in the testing pool a certain amount of time before you can compete again.
Yeah,
and sometimes they can punish you for doing things like that as well.
Yeah, and so CrossFit, we have the testing pool now. Like I've been part of it for I don't even know how many years, maybe 4 or 5. And I have been tested out of competition, not as much as I would like. I wish we were all tested more, but I think it's just like a monetary thing. And then what's challenging is like someone like, yourself or someone watching this who's like a young, fit guy or girl could train really hard for 3 years and then just bang, do the open, semifinals, games. They could just kind of come out of nowhere. And within 6 months, they could do really well and have never been tested in those past few years.
Exactly.
I feel like
that's always been
which is and like we've kind of talked about before, like that's one of the coolest parts about our sport is the actual like barrier. I mean, if you wanted to play in the NBA or if you wanted to play, in tennis and be on TV, like, where do you even start with that? Like it would take a long time to like build up.
I would have to go back in time and start at 3 years old.
Yes, you would. Excuse me, I'm not laughing at you. I just breathed in my spit. Wow. Athletic. Jeez. So that's what's cool about the sport is you can go from 0 to like live on CBS in 6 months, which is pretty wild. But with that comes challenges, and that's obviously one of them is, if all of a sudden you crush the open, like they're not just going to send someone to your house right away and test you. And you can't really expect that either. And so it's a cool part of the sport. But what's also challenging about that aspect is, someone like myself who's had like repeated success, if I get sick on one day of the open and I'm really sick, I'm like, then my season's over. And you could say that about any sport, but
right.
Most sports kind of have that, like, there's sort of these fail safes where it's like, oh, like, if you're really, really good at golf, like you're not just, you get sick at one tournament, you're not all of a sudden like out of the major leagues and you got to wait another year. It's like, no, you just come back to anyway.
So drugs.
But
I think two things. Right. So this is your part in weightlifting. You're part of the testing pool, and it is very unlikely that you can make it to the top or even the middle of the top. So like you have anything beyond nationals is the top in ours, right? So it's like if you're selected for an international team, we have Grand Prix where people can actually go on their own and represent USA as long as they have a certain total, which is pretty interesting. Right? Like you won't get any benefits from USA weightlifting. You will have to fund it yourself, but there are like Grand Prix in Rome and you can wear a USA singlet. As long as you have a certain total, right? They're not just going to allow someone
like you.
Yeah, exactly. So
Brent Snatch 275. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So like in order to get to Pan Ams, you have to be we have like a selection. There's like a line. There's a literal line, and usually depending on how many times you've been in podium placements or in nationals, you'll be put into a testing pool, and then you will have to be and remain in the testing pool for a certain amount of time before you can go into an international or into the Olympics. And that's the thing is you are required to be tested. You will be tested multiple times before even thinking about getting to the top. And I think there should be a potential for that in CrossFit some way. Secondly, I would say the use of USADA would be definitely better than the current thing, whatever they're using, drug safe sports. What is it called? God,
I don't know.
You don't know the name of it?
I know what you mean, though. No, I don't know the name of it. But I know what you mean. I know, like
I think just in general, to have USADA as a third party where they can do double blind testing, and it's just kind of like, hey, this is it. This is just what we're doing. It's the same. Like if we're saying, hey, in order to fucking travel to the UK or anywhere in Europe or even Canada, just present your vaccine card. Okay, whether you like it or not, that's just the rules. Just present the vaccine card. It sucks. Whatever. Blah blah blah. Politics are out of it. This is the rule, right? If we can set something like that up in CrossFit, yeah, it doesn't really mean that there's going to be less drug use. It's just to ensure some sort of guideline, because I feel like it's too much of a free for all right now. At least that's my theory.
Yeah, so part of that, I don't think we can go with USADA because we're not a sport, right? So CrossFit is a brand, and I think because there's like a inter I don't know a lot about this, but there's like an international body, like it's a nonprofit that basically
Oh,
like,
WADA.
well, and it's different than that though. That's different than that. So what I'm saying is the actual like there's like a committee of people that decide what is and what is not a sport. And
Oh,
so
okay. Yeah.
right? And so, like, if you and I just made up a freaking like a Beyblades tournament or something and called it a sport and we wanted it to be drug free, we can't just be like, hey, USADA. They're like, well, are you a sport? And we're like, well, we just want to use you. It's like, no, you have to be a sport and you have to kind of be in this hierarchy of actual accredited sports that there's some like, Switzerland place that
Yeah.
has all the
It's
names.
always in Switzerland. It's always in
Yeah,
Switzerland.
I just assume.
It's like always in,
And
yeah.
and it's from those sports that they choose those sports, and then those sports could go to the Olympics or go to Pan Ams and so on. So that's like one of the reasons CrossFit, because CrossFit's a brand, not a sport. It can't be at a lot of those things, like unless it. Yeah, it's the whole thing. But so I think that's one of the reasons it's not USADA.
Okay. I know that,
But
like,
yeah,
this
I mean,
is, yeah, go
I
ahead.
don't
Go
know.
ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like what other if there's anything poignant I can say about drug use. I mean,
Well, this is where I wanted to go,
yeah,
because I know this is unprecedented, because the sport it's a child. It's a baby child. Okay.
yeah.
And the thing is, it exploded so fast, and now we're calming down. And I think now is when moves need to be made or thought of being made. This is all just thoughts that I'm having. It's turning into more of an advanced sport. People know what it is, so on and so forth.